Hello and welcome to Experimentation Masters, the leading resource for business experimentation. Join fellow innovators, strategists, and entrepreneurs to learn practical tips, methods, and techniques from world-leading experts in experimentation. Design better experiments, lead with more confidence, and have greater impact in your organization. Now please welcome your host, Gavin Bryant.
Hello and welcome to the Experimentation Masters podcast. Today, we'd like to welcome Kate Sutton to the podcast. Kate is the head of Regional Innovation Centre for the United Nations Development Programme. In this episode, we're going to explore how the United Nations uses experimentation to solve some of humanity's biggest and most challenging problems. Welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Thanks for having me, Gavin. It's great to be here.
Okay, so we might dive in straight away. So I thought it'd be really helpful to give our listeners a little bit of a background and overview of your career leading up to appointment at Undp.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And it's been, I'm from New Zealand. So in New Zealand, you aren't generally a specialist, but you are a generalist because there are, it's a small market, right? So I started I did my first master's in politics and bit of international development, and then went through and worked in policy and then corporate. And then I started working, my first foray into international development was working for a Pacific organization, working for Pacific people based in the Pacific, not in New Zealand, and with the foreign affairs and trade and basically supporting SMEs to scale and a variety of other things. I've told to work on renewable energy. I left New Zealand to do my second master's in business administration. And then after that, really dove into working in, I moved to Malawi and set up a business there, consulting on business growth and driving kind of innovation there. And we set up a entrepreneurship network and hub and a bit of a fund for impact there. It wasn't really, I didn't kind of formally get into innovation as a kind of practice until I went and worked for Nesta, which is the UK's Innovation Foundation. Obviously had done work on innovation in my MBA and certainly a lot when I was on the African continent, but kind of the formal, how do you do innovation? What are theories of innovation? Kind of really getting schooled on that. Happened from about when I started working at Nesta. I worked there for a wee while on a variety of different things, which I'm sure we'll touch on in this conversation. But primarily, working with the private sector on social change, and then I did some work in international development on social change with Nesta, and it's just a really amazing organisation to kind of learn and kind of get exposed to 400 people, which was my colleagues working on innovation. There was something to learn every day. And now going from a very innovative and innovation-based organisation to one that it doesn't have, that isn't known for innovation, it's known for its development work, but certainly in the development sector, known for being innovative is the United Nations Development Programme. And so it's been a really exciting journey to go from, working in innovation all the time to now working in innovation all the time, but within an organisation that needs kind of innovation introduced to it. So it's been quite interesting.
Just to dive in for a moment on the experience in Malawi, what were some of the key learnings that you took away from working at grassroots with entrepreneurs in Malawi that have shaped your approach to innovation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think in New Zealand, we have a concept of te rangatiratanga, which is self-determination. And that's always been really strong in my kind of understanding of the world, that people have the answers to their own challenges. They should be empowered, that groups of people should be self-determined to build better lives for themselves, and that the system should sort of respect that and it shouldn't be kind of top down for change. So that was always kind of quite strong in my upbringing and took that very much to the work in in Malawi. I think the entrepreneurs are just incredible. You know, you want to know a hard place to be an entrepreneur. Sub-Saharan Africa is definitely one of the hardest places. I mean, in terms of it's not just about who you are as a character and what your idea is and your ability to execute that idea. It's the enabling environment, access to finance, the legislative environment, just having other people around you, which are entrepreneurial. We're so lucky in New Zealand and the UK and now in Bangkok where I'm living, that those ecosystems are pretty vibrant. But certainly there were real challenges to that. South Africa has a great kind of entrepreneurial environment, but certainly in Malawi was pretty challenged. So I think I learned that the answers, they still had, everyone we worked with had the answers within themselves, where they wanted to go, what their vision was. I guess what we focused on was trying to kind of bring in new ideas or approaches or complementary ideas to kind of support that vision. So I think that's kind of that's pretty much remained with me. And that idea that innovation doesn't come from just a smart group of people in a lab. It comes from people on the ground. It comes from empowered people, really. Empowered groups of people trying to solve problems. That has remained my kind of innovation thesis to now.
Do you find that in sub-Saharan Africa, with the democratization of information around innovation and entrepreneurship, it was less of a barrier for them to get going and was maybe more, as you mentioned, funding and simple things like infrastructure?
Sure. I mean, I think the vision is there, right? Like, as soon as you have access to Facebook or you have access to Instagram, you can see what's going on in the rest of the world and you can get ideas. And so, yeah, I agree with you. That definitely was quite important. And, very much those barriers around the just general infrastructure, what was possible, legislation, finance, access to networks of people who can help you, access to networks of people who can give you ideas or help you when you're stuck. It's just a smaller market. And that's really challenging, right? Entrepreneurs often, there's a reason why entrepreneurs gather together. And that's because they can share ideas and build off each other and build sort of industries around each other, service industries to successful businesses and things like that. And that wasn't the case in Malawi. And that was a real challenge. But, obviously some amazing stuff does happen. And still to this day, many of the entrepreneurs that we work with are still doing their thing and, building successful businesses. So it's not all bad news.
Awesome. So moving along to the UNDP, could you give the listeners a little bit of an overview, given the broad and expansive nature of it, the focus, the goals, the objectives, and where your role fits into the puzzle?
Yes. Well, I mean, our goal is to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's pretty clear. But we do focus down on a variety, several of those goals, to be a bit more explicit. And we also, we have some strategic enablers to achieve those goals, which are innovation, digital, and financing, strategic financing. And those, what we're really trying to achieve ultimately is structural transformation, and that is a big thing. The way that things are working now in whatever development context you're in is not serving people the best. It's definitely leaving people behind. We talk about leave no one behind. There's definitely vulnerability to disasters and shocks. So we're trying to create environments where, we put in place infrastructure, which hard and soft, and to really ensure that no one is left behind and ensure that we can achieve these sustainable development goals. Okay, so that's massive. And then you've got 20,000 people across the globe working on that. And the way that our main kind of modality is we work through country offices. So in my region, Asia Pacific, got 35 countries, 25 country offices. And those country officers work closely with government to try to achieve that structural transformation. Cool. So then you go, all right, each of those countries are going to feel quite different in how they want to do that, especially if you're working with government. And governments will have different priorities about which SDGs they want to prioritize. So there's definitely no one-size-fits-all in the UNDP. It's a very devolved, very decentralized organization, which is great, a lot of fun to work for. And then we at a regional level provide advice, guidance, products, services to the country officers to provide to those governments. And the specialty for my team is innovation and digital.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really stuck out to me in looking at the Sustainable Development Goals is, the gravity, the magnitude and the breadth of them. And I guess it's a bit reassuring to know that local governments are selecting or using a pick and mix approach rather than trying to solve all of them, given some of the challenges. But I was thinking more personally with my experience as well, that traveling from Samoa right through to the Middle East, the geography, the political landscape, the economic landscape, and culturally, they're all so different. So it must be an interesting environment to work within.
Yeah, I mean, certainly all governments have to report on their success towards all of the SDGs. But I would say that, there are some governments prioritise and certainly what they work with us on. So there are other UN agencies. People will probably know, the UNICEF or, the World Health Organization and other kind of multilateral organizations that work with governments on specific things. So the World Food Program, etc. So UNDP doesn't do everything, but I guess what is unique about the development program is that we are a lot more broad than all of those organizations. I think, so the Asia Pacific region is from Samoa to Iran, and certainly very diverse, country officers with 600 people versus country officers with 30 people, countries with over 1 billion people, 1.5 billion to countries with 1,000 people. So for sure, how you serve those countries and how you serve those governments is going to differ. I think what remains the same is a lot of the challenges, obviously the pandemic over the last couple of years, but and that is front of mind. More importantly now, I guess, it's pandemic recovery. So what does this mean for our economy and the sort of structural transitions that have happened within our economies that wouldn't have happened without the pandemic? The climate crisis is obviously the main sort of big, hairy, VUCA, wicked, whatever you want to call it, challenge that's facing us. But absolutely, 70% of the world's natural disasters happen in our region. So there's some pretty big, hairy stuff that kind of impacts all of them to lesser or greater extent. So there are some similarities as well as those differences, as you say, in kind of geography, population, culture, the view of the world, etc.
Okay, so the governments will more specifically engage with UNDP and your team if there's a need around potential financing, digitisation, or some sort of innovation requirement?
So we focus on innovation and digital. There's another team within the office who work on financing. Otherwise, the portfolio would be pretty big. But yeah, so they want to. So we're working in, for example, in Laos and Thailand, Sri Lanka, and soon to be Indonesia on digital transformation with government, and all of that looks slightly different. But ultimately, it's all about better public services, more efficiency and effectiveness, but more importantly, more impact, and doing that with a leave no one behind lens. So it focuses on inclusive digital transformation, not just a digital transformation for the few. And that's an example of kind of how, and then that work is obviously, there are things that we learn from that work, and there are things that we learn about, obviously, political economy, but also practical stuff. And we learn about, next practice, and we try to bring that to other countries in the region. So that's generally the model, is start with doing some experimentation in a few areas and a few countries and a few themes, and then develop that into something that's more scalable.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know with my work in innovation and experimentation that some days it can be quite challenging and overwhelming. And even in a big organization, trying to get a linear binary product to market can be moving heaven and earth. Some days do you just sit back in your chair and go, well, Kate, it's a little bit overwhelmed today?
No, not really. Not really. I think what's overwhelming is it's a big bureaucratic organisation. I think for me that's probably the overwhelming part. I don't feel overwhelmed at all about the scale of the challenges or the scale of what we're trying to achieve. I think that's just not something in my personality. I think I feel very overwhelmed by bureaucracy and admin, whereas I know others in my organisation would feel the complete opposite. So I have to be honest about that. I think what's hard is if you work really hard on something for a series, we don't believe in terms of our innovation thesis and philosophy, we don't believe in kind of single point, quick win solutions, right? We're talking about systems transformation, structural transformation, structural change. So that's obviously going to take a long time. And when you do something and you work on it over a period of years and you start to see change, a minister talking about something implemented, a prime minister changing a focus of a country policy, because ultimately policy change is one of the most important levers in our kind of systems change toolkit. Once you see that, that's really amazing. But then obviously there's times where that doesn't happen and you could have, a change of government to be something completely different. You could have a complete change in sort of what's happening in the country, impacted by some kind of natural disaster or, obviously the pandemic has changed what's happening in some countries. Or you could have a coup or some kind of war that really changes everything. And that work can feel pretty wasted or, it doesn't come off. That can be dispiriting for everybody involved. But no, I don't feel at all overwhelmed by it. I think it's important. The reality is that more is more when it comes to tackling these challenges. We don't have enough smart people or smart solutions or smart or good, just enough people working on these problems. So definitely the more the merrier, and we need to feel positive about how we can change them. Otherwise, I guess we'd all just give up, pack up and do something a lot smaller, I imagine.
Okay, just getting back to your personal innovation thesis, which you were touching on previously, what are some of the guiding principles that you've formed given your global exposure and expertise in innovation?
Yeah, so everyone can be an innovator. I don't believe in this kind of real technocratic specialism thing. Yes, there are innovation specialists like myself who understand the kind of theory and practice a lot more. But at the end of the day, good ideas can come from anywhere. How you implement something, there's a variety of different ways that you can implement. There is not just one way. That's also an important part of the thesis. It's really important to have a business model and a scaling plan in mind. That can change, but having a kind of hypothesis about what there might be is really important. Not every innovation needs to be scaled in the way that you might be thinking, so it doesn't have to become massive or multi-country. It can be local and small, but there needs to be sustainability. So in terms of thinking about scaling in a variety of different ways, I think often now, unfortunately, the word scaling has been synonymous with this kind of hyper-scaling of tech businesses, and that's not really how most scaling and certainly in development or social innovation happens. I think definitely the kind of power of good processes. So having a hypothesis and then having a process that supports that hypothesis and really taking the time to see some emergence, but also, I guess, running at two speeds, taking time to have that emergence, but then also trying things and seeing if they work or not is really important. So a lot of stuff around there being no right way. And I think often experts get really obsessed with the right ways. And I think having a strategic objective is really important, holding that kind of mission tightly, but the way to achieve that mission more loosely, I think is really important. And then, I think the right way thing, because then that's where ego comes in and all of that junk, which we don't actually have time for when we're focusing on these big problems. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree that when people become really set around the methodology and approach, it can come down to ego and being defensive around that methodology and approach. But to your point, it's more about having a loose set of approaches, skills, capabilities, frameworks and tools that can be broadly applied to solve any problem, depending on the type of problem you're trying to solve.
I mean, I definitely think having a methodology and approach and trying to follow that is important. But what I would say is so don't be scattered about it. Because often what you'll see is people will go, oh, we just want to see what emerges. Well, the problem with that is usually there's bias that comes in, and there's a whole lot of bias around where you come from in the world and your gender and your hierarchy. And, so you're not actually getting true emergence, which would be, everybody being involved in stuff coming through. So I think we have to be really aware as practitioners of our kind of biases and kind of where we sit in the system and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely think having a method and approach that is followed is really important. But the point is that you've got to learn as you go, and you've got to iterate as you go, and you've got to purposefully iterate, not, oh, this didn't work, let's try something else. It's like, this didn't work. Why might it not have worked? What's our new hypothesis? And I do get quite frustrated with people going, oh, we'll just do an experiment without really thinking about kind of what are the parameters of the experiment? Who might be impacted by this? What are the potential consequences of this? How can I hold this loosely enough that it means that new things can emerge, but also tightly enough so that people don't feel lost and frustrated? So there's a lot of kind of skill to designing this work.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the top line innovation process. You've touched a few times on hypotheses so far. So your process seems to be heavily anchored and hypotheses led.
No. I mean, this is what this is the real world. So this is what you say you do, and what you do are obviously two different things. So, but I'm being glib. I think there's two ways that we do experimentation. The first one is very customer-led. So I'm a government or I'm in a country office, and this is what I think we need a program around. We've got issues around youth unemployment in our country. Okay, cool. So we could just design a concept note and a document around a youth unemployment pilot, which is we're going to do some quick assessment. And we're going to decide that youth unemployment is primarily that there's not enough jobs for young people. Okay, so we're going to kind of try and create some jobs for young people, and we're going to create 10,000 jobs. And that's a traditional kind of development process. What we would do is we'd probably do some kind of ethnography and using some mixed methods, maybe some sense making of what already exists within the country. What are things that work? What are things that don't work? What are the new areas of emergence that we didn't know about before? And we would plot a kind of series of a portfolio of experiments that sit kind of from policy through to behavior, technology, infrastructure, which is both hard and soft. And we'd try and kind of simultaneously run some experimentation to see what works together and what doesn't work together. That's not super hypothesis led until you get to the experimentation stage. So once you have your kind of portfolio, then your hypothesis might be one of the issues in this youth unemployment space is that the government don't actually know what skills are required by the market. Cool, which is quite a normal problem. So our hypothesis is that to change youth unemployment, you need to know what skills are required by the market. Ergo, we're going to create a data repository for XYZ. That's where you start to get more hypothesis driven. I think at the beginning, it's very much about how do we make sense of what already works, what is already happening in this space, what can we scan for the future, horizon scanning and futures thinking to really plug some of the gaps, because obviously things are changing rapidly. If you think about youth unemployment, it's been changed rapidly over the last 2 years. Then you've got your more mixed methods at the beginning there. So firstly, coming from that kind of customer demand. And then secondly, more kind of theoretical, what's the future demand? So my team have been doing a lot of work on circular economy over the last couple of years. That certainly wasn't a demand from governments 3 years ago. Now it is. So we have to use our kind of foresight and our sensing and our kind of systems mapping energy to kind of work out what are the issues that are going to be coming up for our clients and for the people that we're working with, and how can we kind of ensure that we've already done some preliminary work there.
So it seems like, as you mentioned, that upfront there's typically a research process, identifying patterns, themes, key insights, which then feeds into your hypotheses and experiments. Do you find that there's potentially this notion of going macro before micro in breaking down how you would approach tackling key hypotheses? You identify a number of micro experiments to run. Do you find that your partners and governments, they want to jump towards macro, just building the solution?
So I think this is quite a live kind of discussion, and certainly it was a live debate when I worked at Nesta as well. Look, I mean, I think that the strategy that the team has employed so far has been, that micro, let's try things. I think it still works if you have a business model and a scaling plan in mind, because you can be clear how you're going to drive towards the macro. I think it falls over if you stay stuck in the design phase. And this is one of the key criticisms of our profession, is that it's very easy to get stuck in the design phase because it's actually quite fun. There's always new stuff that you can uncover. You're pretty clear that there's never a right answer. No one really wants to make a decision. And so you stay stuck in kind of confirming, you've got to get to 80-20, right? You get to that 80%, but you're still really interrogating the 20%. And actually it was time that we needed to move. And obviously we're working with governments. It's a political environment, but also people. People need to feel enthused, and they need to feel like a movement's building, and they need to feel like there's progress. Otherwise they lose interest. So, I guess this is like all professions where you have like technical specialists and then generalists. As the technical specialists often like to spend a lot of time waiting in the detail, and the generalists just say, can you just get on with it? And the answer is both. Of course it's both. But you do need to build a movement. If you're really wanting to do systems change, you need to build a movement. You need to build a coalition of people wanting to create that social change. You need to be doing those how do we go macro things while you're doing the micro experimentation. And actually, you can, people who might be willing to scale this stuff can be part of that experimentation, can be part of that sense making, can be part of those futures exercises, and that can be really powerful. Starting big, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely this kind of criticism, I guess, of the policy cycle, which is, okay, we've got this huge social issue we want to change. We've come up with some ideas. We'll do some consultation on them. The consultation will help us refine those original ideas. We'll implement it. It'll fail or succeed, and then we'll do an evaluation, and that's it. I mean, what we advocate for is like more learning loops in that. There's nothing wrong with doing one big intervention, but you could also have a couple of small interventions on the side that you're testing. There are ways around this kind of political tension. I don't think it has to be one or the other, but certainly in the political cycle, if you say to someone, oh, we're just going to spend the next 3 years doing a few little things and see what happens. Yeah, it doesn't land politically. So you've got to, you've got to try and find ways that you can do both.
Yeah. Yeah, a good point too. Yeah. be mission and vision focused, and then be prepared to learn along the way and potentially proceed with a lower level of confidence rather than stalling and doing nothing.
But it also depends on your portfolio, right? Like you have a portfolio of more conservative things that are kind of, this is what we're already doing and we're going to scale that. And then more radical things, which is, this is something we hadn't even thought about, but we see that this might be important in this new world. Okay, well, we're going to try that too.
So with the experimentation that the team has done as a leader, what do you see as the key benefits?
Well, we're really lucky. So there's a couple of different levels which experimentation gets done at the UNDP. So obviously my immediate team, but then we've got these accelerator labs which exist within each country most of the country offices. There's 91 labs across the world now, and there's 18 in my region. And they have a head of experimentation within that. So it's 3 staff members within each office. And what their job is to do is to try and bring in a culture of experimentation into the office. Now, and that's obviously with varying degrees of success. I mean, the funders are still very focused on old school development. And so the majority of the office is kind of orientated to that. But what I have noted, and certainly what's been noted through official evaluations and official and then informal feedback, is that having these labs within country offices has really changed some of the way that leadership views innovation, about how teams can see new methods being employed in their development of of traditional programs. So I think that's the bit that I want to hit on is it's all very well and good for a whole bunch of smart innovation people to do a whole lot of experiments to the side, but how do you actually get that to be employed into the centre? And helping people who are running more business as usual, traditional programs, which are obviously super important, think about slightly different ways of maybe doing the initial research. So rather than just employing a consultant who will do a desk review and then a few interviews, maybe we could use different forms of data. Maybe we could do some ethnography. Maybe we could do some storytelling. There's a variety of different methods that could be used to change the way that we do that research phase. And that's really fine, and that in some offices that has been employed. And for them, that's an experiment. Do we get a different result from just doing the traditional thing of reading a few reports that people have already done and then doing perhaps some of our own original surveys? Well, if you do, well, then that's cool. Or if you do get a different kind of insight, well, then that's brilliant. Because we have so much data now, maybe there are different ways of interpreting that data to add into our insights from the initial research phase. So I think that, experimentation is employed in a variety of different ways across the organisation. And I would say, to give the organisation some credit, it really is, people are really open for it. Yeah.
You find as a leader it helps you to make better decisions or to invest resource better? What are the key benefits that you see?
Yeah, so I think there's still challenges of kind of like annual and then 4-year cycles. So I'm very comfortable going, okay, well, we kind of have a good feeling about this particular area that we need to develop some products around this because we think governments are going to want them. We have a pretty good feeling about it because there's some customer demand. There's definitely some futures thinking on this. It's come up quite a few times in conversation. It's part of kind of, there's a lot of people now doing this kind of what's the emergence from COVID going to be? What's the post-COVID recovery going to look like? Okay, so we have some pretty good data that tells us this is going to be a particular area. I'd like to explore in that space for 6 months or 1 year and see what's possible. The organisation does give us space as an innovation centre to do that, which I think is amazing. However, let's be honest, we're still a political, bureaucratic development organisation. So if you do too much of that and none of it comes off, which is obviously if you're a true innovation person, you'd be like, well, none of it might come off. We could do 10 things and 9.5 of them could be a bust. That is probably not that, that's just not acceptable in the system that we're in. So we have to build a portfolio of more radical, I said this before, more radical and more conservative or more not conservative in a bad way, but just more sure thing kind of options. And that I think can be frustrating for really creative, innovative people. It can maybe feel like a little bit sort of, where's the innovation in that? But the reality is that innovation is new to you. It's not new to the world. It doesn't have to be new to the world. So we can take ideas from somewhere else and we can take, and just take it to a new context and modify it for a new context. That is innovation.
Mm.
So, yeah, you need to kind of take a step back and go, where are we in this kind of development trajectory? And what does our portfolio look like? And can we have, a third of the things that might not work and a third that really will probably most likely work and a third that we just don't know. That would be the thinking about the reality. And, if you work in a corporation, that's probably the case too, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you that oftentimes it's less about using experimentation to ask what we should be doing, but it's using experimentation to understand how do you implement and develop the best version of the solution that you're going to implement.
Yeah. Cool.
So you've touched on some of the key challenges. What are some of the pieces of advice that you would give other organizations in being able to implement and try to achieve a level of scaled experimentation?
Well, firstly, you have to decide you want to do that. And that obviously probably sounds kind of obvious, but...
Do you think that's the biggest hurdle for many organizations is being experimentation-led is the hardest decision?
Yeah, I think you need to make a decision that you're willing to kind of have a part of your organization that's going to take some risk or something. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've done that, then you go, okay, so how am I going to actually run that? Am I going to set up a lab or a team? Am I going to try and make it part of the day-to-day work of someone or all of the leaders? Are we going to try and do that in only customer-facing products, or are we going to do that in our internal processes? Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, there's some thinking that has to go involved in that, and that's also a hurdle. And then you need to set up some kind of governance around it, I guess. And I think this is also where there's a stumble. If you go, okay, we're going to do innovation it's going to be efficiency innovation, and we're going to do it in our HR department, we're going to do it around attraction and retention. I mean, it's a tough gig, right? Internal is always really hard because people who are internal are often pretty fixed on how they want things to be. But it might just be incremental innovations. It might be incremental, so you don't really need a business model. It could be focused on efficiencies. But if you're thinking, okay, we want to, I'm an NGO and I think we need to kind of fundamentally rethink how we do our work because it needs to be fit for a new age, or some of the problem that we've been focusing on has shifted. So now it might not be about access to food because we've been feeding people for a long time, but now it's actually about, food supply chains and food deserts and, there's all sorts of stuff around food systems.
Sustainable food production.
Yeah, it could be all of that, right? Wow. Okay, that really changes what we actually have to do as an organization, doesn't it? So, right, we could just wait for a massive hoo-ha. The board, the CEO leaves, the board brings someone in, we run a new strategy. Or we could decide, okay, we're going to experiment in a small way on what we could do here. And I think that would be my advice. I mean, no one wants to wait for the CEO to be removed and the board to change and all of that stuff, which happens. That's too dramatic. I mean, I think good forward-focused leaders will be looking at the signals from their consumers, but also signals from their staff, going, what I did 5 years ago has actually changed because the demand from our market has changed, or we can see these signals from the COP or from, the UN General Assembly or from government signals around policy or local government signals around policy or, wherever you're getting your signals from. And we need to try and do something a bit different. So, okay, how are we going to do that? And then you need to have an organization of people that are empowered, right? Empowered doesn't mean that they get to have their way. I think often what happens is people set up these teams. Oh, they're going to be the experimental team. They're going to innovate. And then those people try and do some stuff and then it kind of happens and then they get frustrated. They go, well, how come this hasn't been picked up by the organization? And so there's a misalignment. It's like just because you do that experiment and it works doesn't mean that it's going to be picked up. There's a whole lot of other things going on. You're not in a vacuum. So they need to have political acumen. They need to work out how to lobby. They need to make sure that the boss that's responsible for that work understands what they're doing. They need to make sure it's part of budgetary processes, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Those skills are really important in terms of being a public innovator and as well as a private sector innovator as well.
Yeah, I don't think we can underestimate communication, influencing, persuasion, negotiation as an innovator and experimenter. It's great to get results and outcomes, but then there's a need to try and influence their uptake and drive them through the business.
And when I talk about scaling, so if you're thinking about scaling like, it's just how do we take Meta and Mega or Meta or whatever Facebook's new name is, how do we take it from 1,000 customers to 1 million customers? Awesome. That's different to what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about scaling, it includes, a business model and a scaling plan. The scaling plan includes that stuff. Who do we need to convince here? Okay, actually, it's not ultimately the board that makes the decision. It's going to be, these GMs are probably the key people that we need to focus on. They just need to be informed of the process. What are they incentivized by? They're incentivized by saving money, not necessarily delivering impact. Okay, how can we show both? All that kind of stuff. That is a scaling plan. Or we're not even going to do this in our organization. We're going to test this here. And then we think that there are a variety of NGOs that we work with or a variety of suppliers that we work with who could actually deliver this innovation better than us. And how are we going to make that part of our plan?
A quick one, 3 final closing questions. Do you remember an experiment that you've performed that redefined your worldview or your perspective?
I don't think there's been anything. I think for me, it's been much more incremental. But I think I did do a experiment with Nesta when we were in Delhi and we were looking at acute malnutrition, and I was with a whole lot of different people who work in Delhi on malnutrition. So we had social enterprises, and we had universities, and we had NGOs, and we had government people, and we formed teams to try and focus on different parts of food systems and malnutrition in that particular part of Delhi. And I think I was interested in the experiment at 2 levels. The first one was the actual things that they were trying to come up with. So the actual process of coming up with new ideas, melding together their different expertise. That was an experiment, to get to the outcomes. And then there was a more meta experiment going on, which is, can people actually who are so diverse actually work together? And can they come up with something that's more than the sum of their parts? And for me, always trying to work on those 2 levels, that kind of operational solutions, ideas, executable ideas level, and also that kind of systems, processes, what's curious here, what are we learning about people and how people work together? What are we learning about this process? I think for me is important. So I always try to have the idea, I'll always talk to my team about the theme, the thing that we're working on. So the subject domain and then the process. And we need to be learning and experimenting on both.
Gotcha. The key thing that stuck out to me there is curiosity. It needs to be a natural, innate curiosity to succeed with experimentation.
Yeah. I wonder if I've always been like that. What I'm told now is that I'm very curious. I'm just really nosy. I think it's more nosy. I'm just really interested in people and really interested in what makes them tick. I'm really interested in why they do the things that they do. I think I'm constantly surprised by people. I'm also really interested in how things emerge, how some things emerge and how others don't emerge within the same, sometimes the same thing works and then it doesn't work, and you're kind of like, what was different about this? I think you have to be curious. You have to be curious to be an innovation person. I think you'd be, if you're not curious, I think find another profession, do something else. But it definitely helps to be pretty relentlessly focused on what can we learn. For me, it's more than what can I learn just as a human, and kind of go, oh, okay, that's interesting. It's like, and then what's the actionable insight here?
Yeah, what's the so what? Okay, question number 2. So are there any resources, books, things that have helped you on your journey with innovation experimentation that you'd like to pass on to listeners?
Yeah, so you had let me know in advance about this question, and I have to say it sort of stumped me. Because I don't really know, but I think I mean, obviously I used to work for Nesta, and there's some really amazing content that Nesta has put together, and in particular they've got a experimenters inventory, which they did last year, I think, and it's aimed at public sector experimentation, but it basically outlines, what is a behavioural experiment, what is just a little bit about the scientific method versus other kinds of experiments. That's really useful, and I think I would encourage people to use that. And in terms of other things, I think I probably spend more time. I've got 2 other books that really have stood out for me and helped me in my kind of innovation journey. One of them is called New Power. It's Jeremy Hyman's and Henry Timms, and I think that was a few years now, maybe 2015. And basically just talking about kind of this sharing it, some of the stuff around like the emergence of the sharing economy and movements. And I think it's interesting now thinking about in the context of COVID and how actually old power, I guess, has taken back a lot of control. But when you're thinking about innovation, it's not who are the established experts and authorities that are going to really solve these problems. It's who are the stakeholders blending with those experts and authorities to solve these problems. And I think for me, that book, New Power, was really kind of articulating that at a time in my life where I was like, yeah, I get this mega trend of like movements, Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff. But how does that actually manifest itself in processes to change systems? And then the third one is a book called Rebel Talent, which is by a woman called Francesca Gino, I think. And she talks about people who are often seen as disruptors, or, when you're having a meeting and everyone kind of agrees and there's that person that's just like, I don't think so. And you're kind of like, this person is driving me nuts. But actually, a lot of it is about like trying to understand the motivations of that person, what that person is bringing to the table, and that those people, that's rebel talent, can really drive innovation, and it certainly drives curiosity. It can drive innovation. It can drive new ways of looking at things. And so I think for me, that book was really useful in terms of how to cultivate that rather than suppress that.
Yeah. Final one. If people want to get in contact with you.
Yeah.
Any socials, LinkedIn?
What? Well, I think LinkedIn, my LinkedIn is pretty active. So people can LinkedIn me. I don't know, you might want to put my handles in your, when you publish this. I'm also on Twitter. I'm not as active on Twitter, but you can definitely tweet me. LinkedIn's really good. I have lots of interesting DMs with people pretty much every day. People sharing with me their ideas and that kind of stuff. And then obviously people can also email. My email exists and it's open. Don't email me before Christmas. I'm not sure when this is going to come out. Please don't email me before Christmas because I'll just go, But I'm always really happy to kind of hear from people and hear what they reflect on what I've said, and whether they think there's whether they want to suggest a different way to think about something. That's always really, really amazing. And I'm happy for you to share those.
Excellent. Let's leave it there. That's a wrap. Thank you so much, Kate Sutton.
Thanks, Kevin.
That's all from this episode of Experimentation Masters. Just one more thing before we say goodbye. We can use your help to keep improving the show. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, you can email at gavin@firstprinciples.ventures. Visit firstprinciples.ventures for show notes, resources, and information. If you enjoyed this show, give us a share on social media. Make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Experimentation Masters. Lead with more confidence.